All right, my friend, it's time to relax and breathe, and we'll begin in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Never Too Late, Real Stories of Reinvention, where we share the stories of dream chasers, career changers, and people who've had the courage to reinvent themselves. I'm Eric Cooter, and each episode I sit down with someone who has taken a leap, discovered a new path, made changes, and found joy in the unexpected. These conversations are about hope, resilience, and hopefully they remind us that it's never too late to chase your dreams and to make changes in your life. All right, we got all that behind us. I have the pleasure of spending some time with a dear friend of mine, the Reverend Sarah Shirley, who I met, well, I'll let her tell some of that, but we met through the Diocese of Southwest Florida. This is going to be the Diocese of Southwest Florida episodes for the last two, but we met and we had a connection through military chaplaincy. And we've got a couple times where we intersected and got a chance to spend time together. And I think I consider Sarah a dear friend, and more than just a colleague. She's a dear friend and a sister. And I'm just glad you're with me tonight, Sarah. Thanks for being on the podcast with me.
I'm really happy to be here, Eric, and thanks for bringing back those memories about going to convention in Southwest Florida and my service dress and bringing greetings and trying to recruit Episcopal clergy to be chaplains in the military.
She was the consummate. If I had been younger, she would have recruited me to come back into the Air Force and serve. But I was wearing the blue uniform too. But it was in the auxiliary of the Air Force, the Civil Air Patrol. But Sarah, I asked you to come on because I do think you have an incredible story. I know your service, 20 years in the Air Force, the Florida Air National Guard, but you were on active duty a lot, right?
It started in the Army Reserve. I did 11 months in the Army Reserve, 89 days of active duty for training, and then I went in the active Air Force, and I was there for a little over 5 years. But I started this savings campaign because it seemed like almost everybody who came to see the chaplains or the shrinks or the first sergeants or anybody for problems had a serious financial component to their problem. So I thought, well, let's get upstream from that and help them get out of debt and save money. And so we started this savings campaign called Military Saves, and it clearly was not going to go anywhere if I just stayed in the military. So I transferred after 5 years or so to the Florida Air National Guard so that I could go work for Consumer Federation of America running the Military Saves campaign. And so it really did become pretty big because we were able to focus on that. And then I did 15 years in the Florida Air National Guard, but I was activated, what they call, put on active duty orders about 10 years out of that. So I had 15 years of active
Wow.
duty when I retired.
Wow. Now, were you a chaplain during all your military service, or did you come into the chaplaincy later?
I joined at 40.
Did you?
Yeah. I had been in Army ROTC when I was 16 and a college freshman, but then I had a lot of health issues and I'd had to drop out of college. And so I didn't think I'd ever get to be a military chaplain, which is what I'd always wanted to be.
Right, right. Oh, wow.
Yeah, well,
So,
I was an anti-war activist,
we chaplains, we have a different way of being in service too, and caring for the people we're called to care for. So you did ROTC, didn't go through that way. So you were in the reserves. But when did you kind of decide? Okay, I have a call. Now you were okay. Let me pause for a second. So let's talk about ordination for a moment. So
Oh
you
God.
when did you okay, let's pause on chaplaincy and come back because there's an intersect there and I'm not sure where it is. But so let's talk about ordination first. So well, let's take a all right, pause. Let's go back further than that. What were you doing before you had this path of military service? What was your career path before that?
Well, so, a lot of people have asked me, how do I do what you did? I want to have the kind of career you had. Well, I've never done that. I've just always people have asked me to do something
Uh-huh.
that they thought they needed help with or that I could And then I go and do it. Not the way to have a career, not the way to build a body of work,
Sure.
not the way to make money. It's not a good plan, really. It's just not.
I
So
understand.
I grew up in a family business providing financial management and accounting services to nonprofit organizations in
Okay.
Chicago. And so I grew up on that family business, and I had been doing some strategic planning consulting work with another group of people that work primarily with small governments. And so I did a little strategic planning for the nonprofits. And, so that's what I did. And so I was executive director of this and that and the other thing. And then I finally went to seminary with the Methodists because the Episcopal Church was not ordaining women when I first inquired.
Okay.
So I knew I was to be a priest from when I was 7 years old. I used to conduct all the funerals for the dead animals in the neighborhood. I'd take my mother's hat slips to wear them as a chasuble and scarves to wear them, back in the day when women wore half slips, and then scarves to wear as a stole. And I would conduct these very, very liturgical funeral services. I probably did it out of the prayer book, like dead bird that ran into the school building next door. I don't know. And then, oh gosh, I don't know, not that many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I asked my mother, who was still alive at the time, "Hey, mom, what did I want to be when I grew up?" And I thought that I'd want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a judge or something like that,
Right.
given my personality and the TV shows I watched when I was a kid and blah, blah, blah. She said, "You wanted to be a priest, a protester, and a soldier, and you wanted to be all three at once."
Oh my goodness.
So as
What a
it turns
mixture.
out, well, but so as it turns out, I did have a career goal
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I did achieve it, but I didn't know it, right? Because I didn't remember that from when I was a kid. So, I mean, I dropped out of college because why bother if I can't, go to seminary and be a priest, blah,
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. Which was a mistake. I should have just gone ahead and done it. And then I would have been a priest from when I was 25 instead of later in life.
Right.
And I think because, I had this like sexual abuse history, my best friend's dad had molested us when we were little. And
Oh
I think
my.
because of that, I just couldn't do a sexist. I had been rejected because I was a girl,
Hmm.
and I had been mistreated badly because I was a girl. And like this, my friend's dad used to say terrible, sexist, horrible thing. I mean, he was awful. And he was a successful person. He was the chairman of the Child and Adolescent Psychology Department at
Oh my
Northwestern
goodness.
University, right? So people didn't know a lot about child sexual abuse back then. I'm 65 years old. I came up in the days of the Take Back the Night marches. We were just trying to get rape victims treated like people and crime victims instead
Right.
of like, whatever. So so I think so I just couldn't do it. So I did nonprofit work. And then eventually Reverend John Norwood, who was the pastor of Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church, where I used to go to church with my friend Mildred, he was a Methodist pastor.
Oh
And
wow.
right. So, but he had been on the staff of I guess it's the Global Board of Pensions for the Methodist Church that was
Hmm.
headquartered in my hometown, Evanston, Illinois. And so when the pastor of Mount Zion died, they tapped him to come in and fill in. And then he filled in for, 35 years. And
That's the way it
so,
works sometimes in the church, right?
so Reverend Norwood, I had been running a museum in Minnesota. And I was going to be leaving the museum and going back to school because I had never finished my bachelor's, but I was teaching marketing at Morehead State University.
Wow.
Right. So I was teaching marketing,
Uh-huh.
strategic marketing for nonprofits at Morehead State University. and running this museum. And I hadn't been at this museum terribly long when I figured out that there was not a chance that the financial statements that they had given me during the interview process could be legitimate. Because we had this exhibit called Dynamation. It was, moving robotic dinosaurs.
Uh-huh.
This was had to be the most profitable exhibit we could possibly have ever, right?
Right?
And the receipts during that exhibit did not match the financial history they gave me. So I figured out that this museum had obtained my services, government grants, bank loans with falsified financial statements. So I'm
Oh
like,
my.
I don't like this. So I went and hired the Teamsters Union lawyer to start building a file so that I could get whatever little bit of cash this place had. It wasn't much, maybe 30 grand or something,
Right.
and out. So I negotiated my way out. And one of the guys on my advisory board, who had not known about any of this, he wasn't on the actual corporate board of directors. He was on, an honorary advisory board.
Right.
He was the president of Morehead State University. His name was Roland Dill, great guy. And I said to Roland one day, I said, Roland, I'm just enrolled as a student because I need to finish my bachelor's degree so I can go to graduate school. I still wanted nothing to do with the church. I'm going to go do economic development based on Christian principles, which I think means generosity. I
Yeah.
think that's what
I
it
think
means.
yeah, I think you're right.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
think, yeah, generosity in
Equity.
Africa. I think, whatever I said, thought I was going to do.
Right.
And so I thought I needed to go get a PhD and blah, blah, blah. So I needed to get my bachelor's degree. And so I enrolled at Morehead State University as a student. And Roland said to me, he said, oh, you're not going to like that. You're going to be really bored and really not a good idea. I'm like, oh, it'll be fine, because I bought a house, I had friends, I had social activities. And I started going to class, and oh, he was right. It was not, I was in an English class and they couldn't write, and it was bad.
Yeah.
And so he said, we have an agreement with Keble College in Oxford, and you could go do a semester there. And I said, okay, I'll go do that. So I went to do that. And at the same time, the woman who had been my department chair, I
Mhm.
can't remember her name now, Linda something, um, because I was teaching part-time at the same university. And Linda had taken a sabbatical and was teaching at the International College of Tourism and Management, a 2-year hotel management college in Austria. And she's like, oh, you're coming to Europe. You got to come and visit.
Right.
So I did. And I went and visited, and then they recruited me to come and teach. So,
Oh my goodness.
which was good because the dollar fell and I was running out of money. I
Mhm.
was in my late 20s. And I went to my first ever Methodist church while I was in Italy, I think,
Mhm.
because before I left for Europe, I went to visit my parents because my mother was having surgery. She had gotten no cardiosis, almost died, was having
Oh
part of her
my.
bones removed, right? So
Mhm.
I had to go visit my mother before I went to, Europe in case she dropped dead or something.
Mhm.
So I went back to Evanston to see my mom, and I had lunch with Reverend Norwood. And I told Reverend Norwood about my plans. Oh, yeah, finish college, PhD, blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, why don't you just cut the crap and, you know, become a Methodist pastor?
Don't you love people like that in your life that just kind of just
Yeah.
go to the yeah, yeah.
So I went to the library because, this was
Because Google wasn't around back.
right. I was going to say it was a long time ago. So Google was not around. And so I went to the library because I didn't know anything about the Methodist Church. I was a lifelong Episcopalian and, you know, that if my church didn't want me, well, screw you, right? Every time I write my spiritual autobiography for
Uh,
any of these things we have to write them for, it starts with, and then I got pissed off because, and then I got pissed off because, and then I'm like, who are you rejecting now in the name of God? I mean, it made no sense. It made
right.
no sense. It's inconsistent with the gospel.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I was only interested in the gospel and the sacraments. It's like, what is all this other stuff? It's
Yep.
insane.
Yep.
Anyway, I look up the Methodist Church. The Methodists had been ordaining women longer than I'd been alive. So I said, okay. And then I got on a plane and went. And so I was confirmed because I refused confirmation in the Episcopal Church because we didn't ordain women.
Right. Yep.
And so I got confirmed at Wesley Memorial Methodist Church in New Inn Hall Street in Oxford, England,
Oh my
right
goodness.
across the street from the original Wesleyan Meeting House.
Oh my goodness.
And then I came back to the States eventually. I went to seminary at the Methodist Seminary in my
Mhm.
hometown. And then I learned that the Methodists were anti-gay, and I'm like, okay, this is about who do you condemn and reject in the name of God. So I was going to quit, but I was doing my internship at the Reconciling Congregation program, which is the inclusive ministries, gender affirming, blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh, don't quit. We need people on the inside. And so I wrote my ethics paper on exercising heterosexual privilege in the discriminatory ordination process in the Methodist Church. Asking the question,
How did that go?
well, I concluded it was not ethical because we're
Right.
an incarnational faith,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So right. So, but they're like, oh, come on, do it. So I did, but I
Mhm.
kind of sort of got kicked out because I refused to go. Well, my thesis in this ethics thing was that by the time you get any power in these hierarchical structures, you've been changed by doing the wrong thing. So if I accept the policies that say that same-sex couples, for example, are not as valuable as mixed-sex couples, then that's going to change me because
Right.
what I do changes me.
Right. Yep.
So I said, okay, I'll get ordained, but I won't do discriminatory pastoral care. If I can't do same-sex blessings, I'm not doing mixed-sex marriages. So
So
I got kicked out of the Methodist church, came back to the Episcopal church, got reordained. The bishop picked the Feast of the Holy Innocents as my reconfirmation date and my ordination date because and I started the Interfaith AIDS ministry in Southern Nevada, and I did that, and I did arts ministry and healthcare ministry. And then I started getting recruited to the military, and I'm like, I'm too old. And they're like, no, you're not. We need chaplains. So I'm like, oh boy, childhood dream, I'll go do this. And I
so now
did.
hang on a minute. So you went through, because I just want to recap this, because we were talking earlier, the pre-interview,
Right. Because
and
we can never get together and just do anything. We have to
we
we have
spent
to
an
go.
hour talking before we actually recorded the episode. But we were talking about, and if I may, and I can edit this out if you say no. But
You may do whatever.
Sarah was like, "Well, oh, well, I don't have this, this idea of reincarnation or a reinvention and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "No, that's BS. You did reinvent yourself over and over already, and we haven't even got into the military chaplaincy part
Well,
yet."
but isn't that just what you're doing? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm the same person. I'm the same mission, right?
Mhm.
Because I was doing the funerals for the birds when I was a child. I always was called on to give the prayer and everything.
Right.
And
Right.
I worked in the nonprofit world. I mean, I ran a youth agency and it's just what I did. And then I taught, and then, and because I think, isn't it just all about love, right?
Mhm.
And organizing things so that you can love people and helping people learn things so that they can love people better. I mean, I think that's the vocation. But we get so screwed up. It's like, no, no, you got to be a bishop. Oh, you got to have a big pulpit.
Yep.
Which I have to say, I do wish my pension reflected that sort of orientation. I do often regret. I mean, I think that's what we were talking about before the
Yeah.
interview. I really do. If I didn't have like a commitment to not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it,
Mhm.
I would absolutely regret what I've done. I think the church is, I'm not very impressed with religion. I think that in our world, all that really matters is money and power. And I wish I had kind of focused on money and power because then you could do some good. Mm. So I
Yeah.
screwed up,
Well,
but what are you
well,
gonna
yeah. I think. Yeah. I mean, I understand what you mean. My motivation to go to seminary and to serve was this desire to help people experience the love of God like I thought I had experienced it. I mean, that was pure and innocent, right? I mean, I really did. I looked around and, a lot of folks in my generation weren't engaged in community, and I'd met friends who just showed me who Jesus was and the way that they lived their lives, and I wanted a piece of that. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh, you need to be on a bishop's staff, and
So
then you
you're
need
kind
to,
of naive and stupid too.
yeah,
I
yeah,
do remember knowing that about you.
yeah. I was naive and stupid, yeah.
Yeah, me
But you,
too.
but at that, but here's the thing. I still don't. I still think that when we talk about reinvention and all that stuff, and I think for me is I, my priestly ministry has never gone away, even though I retired from active ministry. What is it? Almost 3 years now. 3 years. It's just I'm doing it differently, and I've
Yeah.
had to be willing to be flexible and pliable in the matter of circumstance. And I think that's what goes back to what I was saying about you is, it's who you are as a priest has never changed. Even when you were a priest as a child,
Right, right.
burying the birds. But I still think, but I'm still a pre. Here's an example. I was at a dinner last night with some friends from work, and they know me as a pilot instructor on a jet, in a simulator. But a couple of the folks know me as something more, and they asked me to do something that I used to get really mad about at every congregation I served. Is we can't eat until the priest comes in and says the blessing. Well, this guy did it differently. He comes to me, he says, Eric, he said, I usually do this, but he says at this dinner, he said, you're kind of like our unofficial chaplain. Would you mind saying the blessing? And I went, oh my gosh. I mean, I was moved by that, and I said, yeah, I'd love to. And so anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is that even though I don't have a pulpit and I don't have an altar or a table, I'm still a priest.
Well, and since you're trained, you even know how to be non-sectarian and not be offensive. I'm
Right.
always the only one at the table getting pissed off when people pray in the name of Jesus at public events.
Oh, we could
So
have. Oh,
nobody else seems to get offended, and the priest gets offended.
oh.
So, yeah.
So I know exactly what you're talking about because I was a quote military chaplain in an organization, and I had to talk to one of our chaplains at a national event in a mixed company of people that were both religious and non-religious, who were Christian and non-Christian, and say to them, you need to be cognizant of your audience. What are you saying? How clear do I need to be to you?
Very,
Uh,
very,
and
very.
and he's of a denomination where, and he's also a military chaplain trained in the way. And I said to, um, and I had to tell him specifically, you need to not pray. I said, I love the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and I serve Him every day. But I don't need to show that to people by actually saying in His name. He already knows who I'm. And finally, I had to.
I know.
We went down a bunny trail, but anyway. But
Are you
anyway.
sure it's not the guy that used to work for me who prayed at the national event? And I got a call about it from the Pentagon.
Oh,
Bless this guy's heart. He was trying to be nice.
yeah.
He thought he was being inclusive, and he prayed in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And he was a Baptist, and he prayed in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit because he thought he was being inclusive. It's like, oh, Lordy. a little remedial training is needed here. But
So
yeah, anyway,
we
so
have to be pliable and resilient in the face of change. And going back to you were, I mean, you were an Episcopalian, lifelong Episcopalian. You felt called as a, you lived, you were a priest blessing, or sending birds and animals to the Lord, uh, as a child. Um, you went down the, by the way, I grew up Methodist. Just want to say we have other connections too. Yeah, I grew up Methodist. So, and anyway, um, but you were pliable and flexible, and your call as a priest didn't, you didn't let the structure of the organization that was giving you the credentials to define who you were as a priest.
oh, right, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be very good at that.
N-
I've given up opportunities because I'm a company man, if you will. I was canonically resident in a diocese where the bishop decided that all marriages had to be performed in a church building. And so,
that's hard as a military chaplain, right?
well, and I was part-time military at that time. I was in drill status. I
Oh,
was
okay,
not, yeah, I
gotcha,
was, yeah, I was definitely part-time at that time. I was, had not been mobilized yet,
gotcha.
but I had the opportunity to be on ESPN, to be the minister at the run through wedding chapel at the new Las Vegas Marathon. And I was gonna, offering like premarital to couples that were gonna get married
Hmm.
and stuff like that. I thought it was a really good opportunity to share with people what Christian marriage was about.
Right.
And but the bishop that I served at the time was like, nope, can't do it. So I'm a company man as long as it doesn't violate my ethics. I
Right.
could not do that stuff in the Methodist church. I could not do that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
there's
people say a lot.
parents.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted
There's some things that are, what do they talk about, the hill worth dying on, or
you. Uh-huh.
what is the line? And my line is, are you going to be are you going to take care of people? Are you going to be kind to
Yeah.
people? Are you gonna, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I used to, one of my favorite sermons was always, um, when Jesus said, love God and love your neighbor. Um, I don't think he actually meant neighbors that you, that are not hard to love. You know,
right,
and love's not a, it's not a feeling, it's a
right.
verb. And love means caring for others and being with others in their pain, and advocating for them in their struggles. So, and I imagine as a military chaplain, you found yourself having to do that quite often, right? Is loving people that weren't always easy to love.
Oh man, I was in the military when I had to, visit and care for a guy um, that had just, raped and murdered another airman, the mother
Gosh,
of his child. Yeah, I had never had to do that before. I mean, I had taken care of people that had some histories, and I'd certainly visit people in prison, but, I'm taking care of the mother of the girl that's been murdered,
oh my gosh,
right? And advocating for her, not just, pastorally and spiritually, but legally,
right,
right?
right.
Because yeah, and, you know yeah, that was really very
Oh my
interesting.
gosh,
Made arrangements to have him arrested actually, um, in my wing chaplain's conference room after the funeral. So I'm sitting in the lawyer's office with the mother of the deceased airman, calling my wing chaplain saying, "I'm not gonna get back to get things ready for the funeral. Could you please make sure there's these chairs there and those
right,
chairs?" So that was great. He was great. I'm so Tony Saluda was his name, Roman Catholic priest from the Philippines. Great guy. I was always going to visit him, and then he's died. I didn't make it,
Oh.
but he was great. And I had some real jerks for wing chaplains,
Hmm.
Eric, blah blah blah. But Tony, he was a genuine priest, genuine chaplain. He was cool. Yeah, I mean, I think the best advocacy that was good advocacy I did,
Yeah.
and a lot of chaplains would not have. And I was actually criticized when I did a CPE residency um, at a VA hospital. I was criticized for doing advocacy for people. I should just pray for them. I'm like, yeah, man, probably not.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
people need friends. Jesus said, "I call you friend, not I call you, I'm gonna be your sterile, professionally distant pastor." And I just, nobody has ever offered me enough money for me to do that differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the idea of showing up. I mean, he 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 didn't. With even the healings, people, "Oh, he healed people, and it was the miracle." And I'm like, yeah, but he healed people and restored them back into community. He was
Right,
with them in their disenfranchisement from
right.
the community that told them to go out and you're not welcome here. And yeah, you know, and chaplaincy and parish ministry are similar in a lot of ways, but they're very different in a lot of ways. It seems. And you're doing parish ministry again now, right?
I am.
Are you finding? Tell our listeners a little bit about what you're doing now in parish ministry, as much as you want, and then maybe as you're talking about that, how is that different, and what informed you to be able to do that kind of work from the experience you had as a chaplain? Is there any of those connections that you can see? Or first off, tell us a little about what you're doing now, if you don't mind.
So I'm the rector of St. Andrew's Anglican in Riberas del Pilar, which is a community on the shores of Lake Chapala in Jalisco, Mexico, about an hour south of Guadalajara. And this is an English speaking church. It serves largely a retirement community, although in the 10 months I've been here, I have baptized an 18-month-old and a 3-year-old.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, so I'm hoping that we will, do some other stuff. And I'll tell you, it's interesting. The All of the sort of business management and governance requirements that there are in running a little church that has a facility and has bills to pay and staff and all that, um, can really take over the mission of a church. And I think that
Yeah,
has happened here. And so we have a lot of revisioning and refocusing to do. But the bottom line of my perspective is, if we're not going to do the gospel, if we're not going to do the sacraments, I can't be here.
right,
That's it. And at the same time, we're an Anglican church, and so we follow the canons of the church and the rubrics of the prayer book. And so I know I mentioned in our conversation before, it's like, dipping your bread in the wine is not authorized. It's not how we take, how we receive communion in the
right,
Episcopal Church. And they were doing that. A lot of churches went, parishes went to that during COVID, even though it's not hygienic.
right,
And so I called the bishop. I said, "Do you want us doing intinction? Do you not want us doing intinction?" And people still want to. I'm like, "Sorry, no, we're Anglican. Where do you decide which rules you follow and which
right.
rules you don't follow?" And it's kind of like being in the military, right?
Yeah,
You obey the orders unless they're illegal.
right,
And, I thankfully I was never given an illegal order. And a lot of times I have been given, um, I have been asked by congregations, these little congregations that have just been allowed to go and do whatever they want.
right.
I mean, I remember one in Alabama. The bishop didn't want us singing the Lord's Prayer. He wanted us saying the Lord's Prayer during the Eucharist. Well, that was the end of me being their rector, because the choir had lots of power and they were mad because I wouldn't let them sing the Lord's Prayer.
Yep.
And some people would say that that's a stupid thing, a stupid hill to die on. But singing the Lord's Prayer or intinction is not the hill you're dying on. It's like, these are the very minimal things that we have decided as a church bind us together.
Mhm.
The rubrics,
Right.
the bishop. I mean, it's I mean, this
Yeah. But
theological,
there's probably people listening that don't really
right?
understand. Yeah,
And
and it's important stuff.
well, and I may think it's stupid,
Hmm.
but if I think it's stupid, I shouldn't be the rector of an Anglican church.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, as long as
Go
I'm
be
here,
go be evangelical in your own little independent church. Do what you
right?
want to do.
This is not a congregational church.
Or congregational
It
church. Yeah, not evangelical. I
This
used the
is
wrong
an
word.
Episcopal structure,
Yeah.
and this is we're in the and so it's really kind of funny because the Anglican Church of Mexico was a missionary province of the Episcopal Church US, and now is a national church, the Anglican Church of Mexico. And I'm in the Diocese of Western Mexico, and there's this big schism in the Anglican Church of Mexico. And
Oh
so
my
there's a
gosh.
lovely bishop who I served for a couple of months when I just went to fill in for somebody in Cuernavaca in 2019, the summer of 2019.
Uh-huh.
Love this guy. As a matter of fact, when I was asked in 2019 about coming to this church, I said, "Oh no, if I ever move to Mexico, I'm going to Cuernavaca." Well, here I am. You should never say never. You'll end up with the right. So that bishop believes that he is the legitimate primate or head bishop of the bishops of the Anglican Church of Mexico. Well, so does my bishop, the bishop of the Anglican Church of Western Mexico. There's 5 dioceses, 5 bishops, and
Oh my goodness.
it's like 2 against 2 because, and it's like, well, you know what? Until that's all adjudicated, I'm following Bishop Ricardo because he's my bishop.
Right.
And it's very uncomfortable for me. I don't like being in that situation. I certainly don't want to, you know, I don't know, but it's how we roll.
It
He's bishop and he's been very supportive, and I love supporting him, and his wife is fabulous, and everything is, yeah. So,
well, it's interesting just to kind of share a little bit with folks that may not be from the Episcopal Church or even a mainline type church with bishops is like you were saying, we are ordained by a bishop. We are under the authority of a bishop who is elected by the congregations of a diocese. They're elected, but they're elected for life. you
well,
know,
they're elected for life and they're confirmed by the other
by
bishop
the
too.
right and the other standing committees of lay people and clergy
Right.
of the other dioceses. So this is not like somebody we just kind of like. They're not a king. It's a democratic process, but
At the same time,
at the same time they're in charge, and we have to follow not just what the bishop says but the canons of the church, the laws of the church, and
right.
the rubrics of our prayer book that tells us how we're supposed to worship. And that's kind of odd for some people that may be listening, but we've been around for a long time. and
But regardless, I mean, it's not, nobody's in prison, nobody's being
no,
forced.
no,
If
no.
you want to be a Congregationalist, be a Congregationalist, that's fine.
Yeah,
I'm just an Episcopal priest.
yeah.
It's like 3 things. I'm I'm always, well, there's certain things that I'm just going to do my entire life,
Hmm.
and I don't know why. One of them is I'm a Cubs fan, and one of them is I'm Episcopalian, and it's
Right,
just the way it is. And we have been talking for a very long time because it's how we roll.
right.
And I am wondering if there's any way I could be your very first guest that had a part A and a part B.
Oh yeah, I think
Because I
that's
have a
great.
pastoral emergency.
Oh, you got one that just came up.
I do.
Okay. Well,
And
let's do this. because that's important. That's part of being a priest, is that you have a pastoral emergency. And yes, we can do a part B. But I want to ask you one last question, and then we will thank you for being with me. You are awesome, a dear friend that I care so much for. You're my sister, and I can't thank you enough for being on the show. But I got one question, and we'll do a part B. And then you go
Okay.
take care of your pastoral emergency. This is great. That's why we do this. It's like being friends talking. So
Yeah.
right now, last question, then we'll do a part B.
Right.
If you knew somebody that you're taking care of, that you're pastoring, that you're being a mentor or a coach for, that was looking at making a major change in their life at an older age, they're in their late 50s or 60s, and this is a major change, and they came to you and they said, I don't know what to do. What advice would you give them?
I would encourage them to do a couple of things. One thing is I'd encourage them to just do the good old fashioned Ben Franklin planning method and draw a T on a piece of paper and write down the positives and write down the negatives, right? And then I would encourage them to, if they're in a tradition where they pray, I'd encourage them to pray.
Okay.
If they're not in a tradition in which they pray, I'd just encourage them to be still about it. And I would also try to take time to focus on them myself and see what, if anything, comes to me that I might share with them, whether it's a line from scripture that they could meditate on, or a poem, or a movie that they ought to see, or something like that.
I love it.
Um, that's what I would do. You know, in spiritual direction, we listen with our directee
Hmm.
or the leadings of the Holy Spirit in their lives. In coaching, we ask powerful questions to help people hear their own voice. And I
Absolutely.
think it's the same.
Yeah, I think
So
you're
I
on to
would
it.
try to, ask some questions.
Yeah.
I also, even though I came to Mexico because I wanted out of the States, not for because I wanted to come to Mexico, it was not where I wanted to go.
Right.
I wanted to go somewhere else. But I think to be sure that there really is some reason other than a geographic cure
Gotcha.
or fleeing. Fleeing is
Right.
not so, although there's a lot of fleeing in the Bible. We'll have to talk.
There is. That'll be part B, but you're right. Are you running away from something or towards something? I think is the key, if I hear you right.
And sometimes it's really good to run away.
Yeah, there's a time for that. You're right. There is a lot of biblical things. All right, you got a pastoral emergency. I just want to thank you, my dear sister. You are awesome. I want to thank all of our listeners here on this episode. There will be a part B with Sarah Shirley, chaplain, priest, friend, awesomeness. Thank you again for being with us, and thanks for being a part of the podcast. Folks, thanks for listening. We'll have a podcast episode every 2 weeks. Our next guest is coming up pretty soon, and thank you so much for listening, and we really appreciate you being a part of our show, and tune in every 2 weeks. Thanks so much.